I was 24 when I moved into that apartment. It was a converted Victorian house, split into 3 small units. Mine was on the 2nd floor. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, creaky floors. But the rent was cheap, and it had this huge bay window where my cat, Luna, loved to sit and watch birds. It wasn't much, but it was mine. From the start, though, the place sounded alive. Old wood, ancient pipes, random pops and groans at night. I just figured it was an old building. Being an old building, I worked evenings at a coffee shop downtown, so most nights I'd get home after midnight. I'd unlock my door, toss my keys in the bowl, and Luna would trot out from the kitchen meowing like she was greeting me home. It became our routine, but around late October, just as the air started to get that cold, damp feel, something changed. One night I got home late, and as soon as I walked in, I smelled something faintly metallic, kind of like pennies or wet copper. I didn't think much of it. Maybe the radiator. I locked the door, threw my jacket over a chair, and went straight to bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of Luna hissing. That sound, if you've ever heard a cat hiss in real fear, it's not playful, it's deep, guttural. I sat up, and she was facing the wall beside my bed. Fur puffed out like she'd seen something. Then I heard it. A light tapping sound. Not from outside the window, from inside the wall. At first, I thought maybe it was a mouse, but the tapping was slow, deliberate. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. It sounded almost like someone knocking from the other side of the plaster. I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings do that. I turned on a lamp and put my ear to the wall. The sound stopped immediately. The moment I laid back down, it started again, just a little louder. It went on for maybe 15 minutes before stopping completely. I didn't sleep much that night. Over the next week, it became routine. Every night, somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., I'd hear it again. Always the same wall. Always the same pattern. Luna started avoiding that part of the apartment entirely. She'd sleep on the couch instead of the bed, like she wanted to be as far away from that wall as possible. One night I got brave. I grabbed a flashlight and started tapping back. 3 knocks to match the rhythm. Nothing. Then, a few seconds later, 3 knocks came back. Perfectly in sync with mine. I felt this chill crawl through me that I can't even explain. I turned up the music on my phone, just to drown it out. The next morning I texted my landlord. He brushed it off, said it was probably pipes or settling wood, offered to send maintenance later in the week. I didn't mention the part where it knocked back. That Friday night, I got home late again. The tapping started almost immediately after I got in bed, but this time there was something different. Between the taps, I could hear a kind of scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across drywall. Luna was on the windowsill, staring into the corner, frozen. And then, I swear on my life, I heard a voice. It was quiet, muffled through the wall, but I could make out the words. "Let me out." It didn't sound like a scream or a ghostly wail. It sounded tired, weak, like someone who had been talking for hours and finally ran out of breath. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like forever, I said, quietly, "Who's there?" The wall went silent, and then, slowly, a single knock came from the other side. The next morning, I told my landlord that I thought there might be someone trapped in the wall. He laughed. Actually, I laughed like I was joking. He promised to send maintenance to check for a leak. The guy came later that afternoon, looked around, tapped a few spots on the wall, shrugged, said there was nothing there, maybe a loose pipe. That night, I went to bed early, just to get it over with. At 2:07 a.m. exactly, the tapping began again. Only this time, it moved. It started in the corner by my bed, then slowly traveled across the wall, following me. When I moved to the living room, it followed to the wall behind the couch. I was shaking so bad I could barely dial the landlord again. No answer. So I did something stupid. I put my phone's voice recorder against the wall and recorded for 10 minutes. The next morning, I played it back. At first, it was just static and faint taps. But around the 8-minute mark, there's this low voice that says, almost whispering, "I can see you." The voice was male. I don't know how to describe it. It sounded wet, like someone speaking through blood. I didn't sleep that night. I called in sick the next day. When the landlord finally came by, I insisted he open the wall. He reluctantly agreed and brought maintenance again with tools. They cut a small square near the baseboard and shined a flashlight inside. There was insulation, dust, and something else. A pair of eyes staring back at us. The maintenance guy stumbled back, almost dropped his flashlight. We both just stood there. The eyes didn't move. They looked dried out, like marbles. The landlord muttered something like, "Oh my God," and ran out to call the cops. When police arrived, they tore open the wall. What they found made one of the officers step outside to throw up. Inside the wall was a man's body, or what was left of it, wedged between the studs, curled up like he'd been hiding there for a long time. He was skeletal, with bits of old fabric that used to be a coat. The smell was indescribable, like wet metal and rot. There were signs he'd been alive there at some point. Old food cans, crumpled newspapers, scratch marks along the wood, like he'd tried to dig his way out. The coroner said he'd likely died weeks, maybe months ago. The police asked if I'd heard or seen anything unusual. When I mentioned the voice, they didn't laugh. One detective actually looked pale. He said it wasn't the first time he'd seen something like that. People hiding in crawl spaces, attics, walls. But never for this long. They eventually identified the man through fingerprints. He was a transient who'd been squatting in abandoned homes around the area. He'd disappeared nearly a year before I moved in. They think he might have crawled in through the crawl space under the house, found a gap in the studs and gotten stuck, alive, until he couldn't get out. But what haunts me most is the timing. The tapping started about 6 weeks after I moved in. The coroner said the man had likely been dead for much longer than that. So if that's true, who was I hearing? After the police left, the landlord patched up the wall. He offered to break my lease, and I took it immediately. I packed my things and moved out that same week. The night before I left, I did one final walkthrough. Luna was already in her carrier. As I turned off the lights, I heard a single sound, faint but unmistakable. 3 slow taps on the same wall. I didn't even look back. A month later, I got a call from my old landlord. He said the new tenant complained about weird noises coming from behind the walls again. He laughed it off, said maybe it was mice, but there was something in his voice that told me he didn't really believe that. I hung up, blocked his number, and never went back. To this day, I still can't sleep without music playing. And sometimes, when the room goes completely quiet, I swear I can still hear it, that same pattern, faint but steady. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. When I was 12, I lived in a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place with 1 main street, 2 gas stations, and nothing to do but ride bikes or sneak into old buildings. Behind our town was a stretch of woods called Hollow Road, a narrow gravel path that led about half a mile into the forest before ending at a rotting 2-story farmhouse. Everyone in school knew the stories about it. Some said a family vanished there back in the 50s. Others said a man had gone crazy and locked his daughter inside until she died. None of us knew which version was true, but everyone agreed. You didn't go there after dark. Of course, that meant we had to. It was Halloween, 2008. There were 3 of us. Me, my best friend Tyler, and a girl named Cass. We were that awkward mix of too old for trick-or-treating, but too young for parties. So instead, we decided we'd do something actually scary. Tyler brought a flashlight. Cass brought a disposable camera. one of those cheap ones from the pharmacy. I brought my dad's old pocket knife because at 12, that made me feel brave. We waited until around 9, when the trick-or-treaters were gone and the streets were quiet. The air was cold enough to see your breath. The moon was thin, and the woods were black. As we pedaled down Hollow Road, the gravel popped under our tires. The further we went, the quieter everything got. Even the crickets stopped. Then, through the trees, we saw it. The house. It was bigger than I expected. 2 stories tall, paint peeled to the wood, one window boarded up. The porch sagged inward like the house was exhaling. A no trespassing sign hung from the fence, half rusted and unreadable. We left our bikes by the gate. The moment I stepped off mine, I swear the air felt heavier, like the humidity you get before a thunderstorm. Cass hesitated, clutching her camera. "Let's just take pictures from outside," she said. But Tyler was already halfway up the path. "Come on," he called back. "It's just a house." He pushed open the front gate, and it made this long, drawn-out creak that sounded almost alive. The porch was littered with old beer cans, spray-painted names, and broken boards. Someone had carved "Keep Out" into one of the railings. Tyler tried the door handle. It didn't budge. He gave it a shove with his shoulder, and it finally cracked open with a puff of dust. Inside was pure blackness. I clicked on my flashlight, and a beam cut through the dark. The inside looked like it had been frozen in time. Furniture still there. A few old pictures on the walls. Wallpaper curling away like skin. The first room we entered was the living room. There was a fireplace filled with ashes, and an old rocking chair turned toward the window. Cass took a picture. The flash lit the room for half a second, and in that brief moment, I could have sworn I saw something hanging from the ceiling in the next room. When the flash faded, it was gone. Tyler laughed. "Bet that's where the dad hung himself," he said. He was trying to be funny, but his voice cracked a little. We decided to split up. A terrible idea, I know. But that's what 12-year-olds do in horror stories, right? Cass went upstairs to look at the bedrooms, while Tyler and I stayed downstairs. The kitchen was the worst part of the house. It smelled like old mold and burnt wood. The counter was covered in empty jars, and something dark and sticky that looked a little like dried blood. On the table was a newspaper dated 1957, its headline half readable. "Local girl missing. Hollow Road investigation continues." Tyler laughed nervously, probably planted there by teenagers. But when he reached out to touch it, the paper crumbled to dust. We both heard Cass yell from upstairs. It wasn't a scream, more like a startled shout. We ran to the staircase. She was standing in a hallway lined with 3 doors. The first 2 rooms looked like bedrooms, one with a broken crib, one with a collapsed bed frame, but the third door was different. It was smaller, almost hidden at the end of the hall, and it had a piece of wood nailed across it with 2 rusty screws, like someone had tried to seal it shut. Cass said she'd heard something behind it. A small thud, like someone knocking from the other side. Tyler, being the brave idiot he was, pulled out his pocket knife and started prying the slat off. Each screw squealed as it came out. When the last one came loose, the door slowly creaked open on its own. The smell that came out was the worst thing I've ever experienced. Not rot exactly, but stale air, like something had been trapped for decades. Inside was a tiny room, no furniture except for a small bed frame with a tattered quilt. And on that bed was a doll. It was an old porcelain doll with a cracked face, one glass eye missing, and its mouth stitched shut with red thread. Cass gasped and covered her mouth. Tyler laughed again, but it came out shaky. "Okay, that's weird." He reached out to touch it. The second his fingers brushed the doll's dress, something hummed. It was soft, distant, like a low lullaby coming from somewhere inside the walls. Cass said, "Do you hear that?" It got louder. A woman's voice, wordless but slow and rhythmic. Then the light on Tyler's flashlight started flickering. "Let's go," I said. We turned to leave, but before we could step out, something slammed upstairs. A door, hard, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not ours. They were heavy, deliberate, like someone walking slowly down the hallway toward us. Cass whispered, "Who's up here?" But nobody answered. Tyler shone his flashlight toward the hall. At the far end, just before the stairs, we saw the faint silhouette of someone standing. It was small, maybe child-sized, and it wasn't moving. Then it tilted its head sideways, like it was studying us. Cass let out a scream and bolted for the stairs. We ran after her, tripping over each other as we scrambled down. The moment we hit the first floor, the front door, which had been wide open, slammed shut so hard the windows rattled. The house went pitch black, and that humming started again. It wasn't coming from upstairs this time. It was coming from behind us. We turned and saw movement in the corner of the living room. The rocking chair was slowly moving back and forth, and in the dim light from my flashlight, I saw something small sitting in it. The doll, the same one from the room upstairs. Its head was tilted down, the single eye catching the flashlight's beam, but its mouth, the red stitching, was gone. The threads were hanging loose. Cass was crying at this point. "Please, just open the door." Tyler ran to the handle, yanked. Nothing. The door wouldn't move. I swear it felt like someone was holding it shut. From the outside, then, from the kitchen, we heard that same humming again. Only this time, there were words. A faint, almost whispering voice singing, "Don't take her, don't take her." Over and over, Cass screamed again, and I just remember grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back door. We burst through the kitchen and into what used to be a mudroom. There was a second door that led to the backyard, and by some miracle, it opened. We didn't stop running until we hit the main road, panting, out of breath, not even looking back. When we finally got home, Cass's disposable camera was still around her neck. None of us really wanted to see what was on it, but curiosity got the better of us the next day. When we developed the pictures, most were blurry or black, but one, the one she took in the living room, came out perfectly clear. It showed the fireplace, the rocking chair, and in the reflection of the window behind it, you could see a little girl. She was standing outside, face pressed to the glass, watching us, except there was no outside light. That window had been boarded up from the outside. We swore we'd never go back there again. And for years we didn't. The house stood empty for a long time, until the county eventually tore it down. I thought that was the end of it, but when I was 22, back visiting family, I drove down Hollow Road again, just to see if it was still there. The house was gone, replaced by overgrown weeds and a rusted fence, but someone had left something at the site. Sitting right in the center of where the porch used to be was a small, old-fashioned doll, cracked face, one glass eye missing, the mouth stitched shut with red thread. I didn't get out of the car. 2 years later, Cass sent me a message on Facebook out of nowhere. We hadn't talked in a long time. She said, "Do you ever think about that house?" I told her I tried not to. She sent me a photo. It was her daughter, maybe 5 years old, smiling in their living room. In her hands, she was holding a small porcelain doll. Same cracked face, same missing eye, same red thread around the mouth. She said she'd found it in a thrift store. She thought it looked familiar. I didn't respond. I just stared at that picture for a long time. Then I deleted the message, but every year around Halloween, when the wind picks up and the trees start to go bare, I still think about that night on Hollow Road. And sometimes, when it's quiet enough, I swear I can still hear it. That faint humming, offbeat and wrong, drifting from somewhere you can't quite place. Maybe the house is gone, but I don't think the thing that lived there ever left. I moved to the city for college in 2016. It was my first time living away from home, and I ended up sharing an old brownstone apartment with 3 roommates, Megan, Connor, and Lucas. The place was ancient, radiators that hissed, pipes that clanked, and floors that sighed, like someone else was walking just behind you. We joked that the building had a heartbeat. By late October, we'd gotten used to the noises. Halloween fell on a Monday that year, but campus partied all weekend. So by the 31st, the 4 of us were too tired to go anywhere. We decided to stay in, order pizza, and watch scary movies. Around 11 p.m., the doorbell buzzed. Megan went to answer, expecting the delivery guy, but no one was there. The intercom crackled, then went dead. We laughed and figured it was some drunk student pushing buttons. 10 minutes later, Megan's phone rang. The caller ID said unknown. She answered the speaker. A man's voice, calm, polite, said, "Good evening, miss. This is Mr. Hale from City Utilities. We're just confirming that your apartment still has water pressure." She told him everything was fine. He thanked her and hung up. We didn't think twice until the phone rang again. Same voice, same calm tone. "Sorry to bother you again," he said. "But can you check that the front door is latched properly? We've had reports of drafts in your building." That got our attention. The main entrance to our unit was painted green, the only green door in the hallway, and it did have a draft, because the frame was warped from years of rain. "How do you know about the draft?" Megan asked. He chuckled softly. "Because I used to live there." Then he hung up. We stared at each other, half creeped out, half thinking it was a prank. Connor said maybe it was the landlord. But when we checked the call log, the number was blank. No record, just unknown caller. Around 1 a.m. we were cleaning up when we heard the sound of the front door latch, a slow metallic click, like someone had tested the handle from outside. Lucas ran to the peephole. Nobody in the hallway. We decided to slide the chain lock across and forget about it. At 2:07 a.m., the intercom buzzed again. This time, there was a voice behind the static. "You should really keep that green door closed." Megan froze. Connor grabbed the receiver and shouted, "Who is this?" The voice replied quietly, "Mr. Hale." Then nothing but static. We tried to laugh it off, but an hour later we heard footsteps in the stairwell, slow, measured, coming up from the alley entrance below. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor. The building's lower level opened into that narrow brick alley, a place nobody used. The footsteps reached our floor, then stopped. We waited. After a minute, Connor opened the door carefully, chain still on. The hallway was empty, but on the floor just outside was a folded piece of yellow paper. In messy handwriting it said, "Lock the door after midnight. It sticks when it rains." It was raining outside. At that point, Lucas wanted to call campus security. But I remember saying something like, "Maybe it's just the super." So I went downstairs to check. The air in the stairwell smelled like wet, concrete, and old paint. When I reached the ground floor, I saw the green door to the alley slightly open. Just an inch. A draft pushed rain mist through the crack. I called out, "Hello?" No answer, but I heard a soft humming, not a tune I recognized. Something slow and offbeat, like a music box that had lost tempo. I closed the door, slid the bolt, and went back upstairs. Around 3 a.m., Megan's phone rang again. Same unknown number. This time, she didn't answer. The call went to voicemail. We listened to it together. It was 30 seconds of silence. Then a faint male voice. "I can see you forgot to lock it again." We checked the door. It was still locked, but the chain was dangling open. By morning, we were tired and shaken. We reported it to the landlord, who promised to change the locks and install a camera in the hallway. That afternoon, a mail carrier came by with a clipboard. He was an older man, gray hair, kind eyes. He asked our names for an updated tenant list. When we finished, he glanced around and said casually, "Have you ever met old Mr. Hale?" We froze. "Who?" I asked. "Mr. Hale," he said. "He used to own this building. Before the renovation. Handyman, locksmith. Passed away years ago. Nice fella, though. Used to fix the doors himself." Megan and I just looked at each other. That night, we had a few friends over for a small Halloween get-together. We tried to shake it off. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door. A steady, patient knock. Connor looked through the peephole and said, "There's a guy out there. Old coat, gray hair. Maybe the landlord." Megan opened it a crack. The man on the landing smiled politely. He looked normal enough, late 60s, rain-damp coat, hat in hand. He said, "Sorry to bother you. Name's Hale. I used to live here. Just checking that you keep the locks in good shape." We stood there, speechless. He nodded toward the green door. "Especially that one," he said. "It doesn't like being left open." Then he tipped his hat and walked down the stairs. We didn't hear the building door open. We didn't hear anything at all. The next morning, the locksmith arrived to replace the bolts. When he removed the old plate, he found something wedged inside the doorframe, a rusted key tag that read, "Mr. Hale, 3A. Our unit was 3A. He asked if we wanted to keep it as a souvenir. Megan said no. He tossed it into his toolbox and left. That night, the voicemails started again. Different numbers this time, but the same voice. Each message was just breathing, then a quiet hum. Always the same tune. On the fourth message, he finally spoke. "Doors remember who locks them." We called the police. They checked the caller IDs and said the numbers didn't exist in any database. They searched the alley and found muddy footprints leading to the green door, but they ended right at the threshold. No prints going away. A week later, a storm hit the city. Heavy rain and wind. We lost power for a few hours. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a soft rattling. The green door was shaking in its frame, the bolt clinking back and forth, like someone was trying to force it open. I got out of bed, grabbed my phone light, and walked to the hall. Every step I took, the rattling grew softer, as if whoever was on the other side could hear me coming. When I reached the door, the noise stopped. And then a voice came through the wood, calm, familiar. It stuck again. The next morning, the locksmith came back to finish repairs. When he removed the inner panel, he found a thin brass plate between the layers of wood, like a hidden name tag. It read, "Property of E. Hale Lock and Key Co." He looked confused. "I didn't put that there," he said. He left it on the counter and left. We moved out a month later. I transferred schools. Megan still gets random voicemails every Halloween, always from unknown. Always a few seconds of silence, then that offbeat humming. She keeps one of them saved. If you listen with headphones and turn the volume all the way up, you can hear it at the end, a door creak, then a man's voice saying, almost kindly, "Thank you for locking it."